Hello there, and welcome to day 6 of A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. As you can see, the framing is slightly different today. As I said, this process was always going to be a little bit evolutionary, maybe, or slightly changing, you know. I was starting to become quite fond of the setup that was appearing in my previous videos, but with one thing and another, this is currently how it's set up, and I am sure there will be days when it will look completely different. But so far so good. Today I thought I'd take a look at the 2012 Dredd film based on the 2000 AD comic series. I will say from the off that I have very limited experience of 2000 AD and Judge Dredd, and when I say limited, I literally mean I have seen the Sylvester Stallone film that I know isn't massively popular, but for its defence, I actually don't think it's too bad. I think the world building within the film is pretty good. I think it does tell an interesting adaptation of the film. It's just quite glaring where it, you know, the strings are a little more obvious in that version. But focusing on the 2012 film, it's pretty good, I have to say. I chose it because I really wanted to have some relief from the more contemplative, self-reflexive, slower narratives, and have something a bit more high octane and action to vary things up, and this was definitely the solution to that. It's directed by Pete Travis and written by Alex Garland. Alex Garland, who also worked on 28 Days and Weeks Later, Sunshine. He's gone on recently to do Annihilation, which is a really interesting science fiction film, and Ex Machina, which is an even more extraordinary science fiction film that I might do one day here, because I love that film. I think it's a really excellent modern day sci-fi narrative. This Dredd stars Carl Urban as the eponymous Judge Dredd, with Olivia Thirlby as the rookie judge in training, Judge Anderson, and the villain is played by Lena Headey of Game of Thrones fame. And really, there's not a great deal more to say about the narrative. The beauty of this film is that the plotting is very, very straightforward. It is a self-contained action set piece film. There's something quite refreshing when you have a film, especially an action film, where it doesn't try to create too much plotting and overcomplicate the narrative. It simply outlines what the film is trying to, you know, the objective of the characters, and then carries that out from beginning to end. It's very theatrical in that sense, very stagic. It really contains it to one location for almost the entirety of the story. And you really see sort of the films that influenced this film and what it went on to influence. Because you think of things like The Raid that came before it, definitely directly impacted this. And of course this has gone on to impact things like the Marvel Netflix Daredevil or The Mandalorian, and the links between this and The Mandalorian are, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if most of the creative team behind The Mandalorian watched this and really used it as inspiration for how they were going to tell the masked character story. Because that's the big challenge, I suppose, with the Dredd and the Sylvester Stallone one outright just completely dismissed the core concept that the main character is never meant to take his helmet off. But that's a very hard thing to have for an entire film with a character who never takes his helmet off. But it really does channel and advance the Western trope of the man with no name. And there's something very Terminator about Judge Dredd and the way that Karl Urban plays him, in that he's just this unstoppable force, and it's very much a case of his opposition throwing everything they can at him and seeing the ways in which he just keeps pushing through. There's something very John Wick about that, because admittedly he's not quite the Terminator in the sense that he just walks through everything. You do see injury, and you see him trying to work out ways around being trapped in this high-rise and having to get through hordes of enemies. And again, there's something very, I hesitate to say, but I would say almost like balletic about it. But then I think a lot of fight choreography is very balletic in that sense. It makes me think, of course, that John Wick also would have gone on to be derived from this style, and John Wick famously both shows the intensity of gun battles and hand-to-hand combat, and all the variety of different kinds of fighting that an action film can do. It also shows the character who is almost unstoppable, but also shows that character going through injury, trying to work out ways to get around insurmountable problems or strategize, and you really get carried away with that character. Olivia Thirlby is, I suppose, our gateway character. She is a rookie judge who's being assessed by Judge Dredd, and her main characteristic is that she's a psychic. Other than that, you really get only smatterings of her personality. Well, you get more personality from her, but her character is not as fleshed out as one might expect for this kind of film. We get a light backstory from her, and we do get a sense of interactions she has with smatterings of characters throughout the narrative, people who know her or are trying to make judgments based on her vulnerability. Where Judge Dredd comes in as almost the outsider who is just cutting his way through to get to what he needs to. She's supposed to be the character who empathizes with the environment she's in and learns from it and has the arc. But frankly, even that is really a set aside. The film knows that it's really simply about creating this film-length set piece, as it were, and I think it should be appreciated for having achieved that. I do think it's a film possibly ahead of its time. I think if it had been made now, we would be getting a Dredd franchise, probably even more low budget, with probably distributed by Amazon or Netflix, and perhaps a series, you know, like The Boys, which of course links via Karl Urban. And I think it's a shame, because I would have liked to seen more films from this version of the character. But for a film that's self-contained, tells a straightforward narrative, I rather appreciated its frank straightforwardness, really. So yeah, again, I think it's been a rather successful watch. I will see you again tomorrow for our next film. Thank you for joining me.